The Department of Education under Donald Trump is planning to terminate about 50%, that's half, of its current staff. The plan is to place many people on administrative leave starting next Friday. Officials tell NBC News that the career staff will be asked to basically take laptops home, work from home tomorrow. This could lead to over 2,000 career employees getting termination notices. That's news we just got in, and we have more actually on education later in the hour, but we wanted to share that breaking news when we got it. Now we turn to legal news as Donald Trump is facing these losses in court, starting the week with what Newsweek calls a triple legal blow. And we've been charting this for you. This week, early in the week, it's mostly losses. 2 over Trump's executive order on DEI, 1 about federal grants, the other restoring grants, at least temporarily, for teachers who lost them under the initial order, which is paused. Another appeals court denying Trump's bid to pause the birthright citizenship order. So that's been frozen for some time. And a district judge temporarily blocking the efforts to deport the Columbia graduate student who was also a Palestinian activist, Mahmoud Khalil. Another loss over the USAID funding freeze, which we've been covering. A judge ruling Congress has that power. As we've explained, it's more about power than policy. You could change some of that funding, but most courts have said you would need Congress to do it. One judge saying the agency is operating with unusual secrecy in dealing with the Musk clash. And that's what we have as of Tuesday. A pattern here over the last 2 weeks, you can see the many legal losses. All of this paving the way for more loyalists in what were nonpartisan positions. And as DOJ faces a wider purge of career officials, we're joined now by the former head of the DOJ Criminal Division, Leslie Caldwell, amidst these debates over the enemies list, the DOJ's approach. We've had over this week reports about basically pushing out national security officials at DOJ, other sort of nonpartisan figures. Tonight, we have reporting about shrinking the public integrity section, which has always sort of been the cop against corruption. Tell us your view of what that section does. Not everyone follows every detailed section of DOJ, and how you react to this news.
So the public integrity section essentially investigates and prosecutes most major public corruption cases in the United States, all over the country. They have a lot of specialized knowledge and experience, and they do cases involving members of Congress, including the Senate and the House, state and local public officials. They're involved in really pretty much every significant public corruption case in the United States. So it's really quite surprising and alarming, frankly, to see this most recent action where they're essentially apparently going to disband the public integrity section.
A lot of this is very blunt.
Extremely.
There was talk during the campaign about what do you really mean and how literal. Is Trump only aggrieved over his personal case history, right? That level of revenge. When they say they're not going to enforce bribery abroad, which they've said, when they're going to shrink, or some people are calling this partially disbanding, patrolling bribery and corruption in the United States, that would potentially apply to many politicians. It's not clear that it may be somewhat self-interested in the revenge tour over Republicans, but it might also open up more potential corruption by any number of officials in any number of parts of the country. How can you be a DOJ that gives a pass to corrupt politicians?
You know, I think that that's a huge mistake that they're making, and you used the word blunt before. I think that it's hard to see that this is really well thought out. I don't know how much time was spent thinking about this. I think that what Trump is doing is a combination of revenge for his personal issues, things that he perceives to be slights to him, and also essentially, potentially being able to reward other people who, by just essentially immunizing them from harm, by doing things like destroying the public integrity section and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act section, which is the overseas bribery, as you mentioned. They also disbanded the kleptocracy initiative, which was focused on theft of essentially funds from foreign countries that was then used to invest in United States things like real estate. So there's a real element here of these anti-corruption efforts are not valued and should be stopped.
Yeah.
And what that ultimately is intended to achieve is hard to say, but it doesn't look like it could be anything good from my vantage point.
Yeah, and if we kind of even put the MAGA and current polarization aside, right, if you just go back to first principles in governance and in law, societies with rule of law care a lot about patrolling the public good and the public welfare, because of course there is a temptation. If a random individual is overseeing a pension fund and they have now billions of dollars of sway, we were covering the markets earlier, of course there could be a temptation, if few are looking, to abuse that influence, whether it's with direct embezzlement and stealing or kickbacks or just getting all sorts of other quid pro quo special treatment for what they do with the billions, right? It stands to reason that we care about that even separate from the particular controversies of Donald Trump and his vengeance tour, right? And so do you worry that he sort of looks at the country and says, oh, he can make more deals with more corrupt folks in both parties if it's open season?
I mean, I obviously don't know what he thinks, but that's clearly the message, which is that we don't value these anti-corruption efforts. We don't value integrity in behavior. And yes, we care about violent crime and drug dealers and immigrants, but we don't really care about white-collar cases or public corruption. That's kind of been the message that's been coming out. Again, whether that's the intended message or not is hard to say. I think it must be at least partially intended. And the way it's being executed is just the way the messages are being delivered is, as you said, very blunt, but also almost with an undercurrent of nastiness, and lack of respect for the people who are affected and lack of value of their work, which I think is a really unfortunate way for DOJ to conduct itself and for the administration to interact with DOJ.
Yeah, and you've always been thoughtful and precise with your words, so hearing you say it that way is striking. The last point from Wall Street Journal, the new FBI director wants something in connecting with the White House that Bob Mueller didn't want, that James Comey assiduously avoided. He wants a literal direct line. What's the best way for him to call the White House, potentially the president, on the secure line? Obviously, a responsible FBI director has dealings with folks. But does this concern you that he wants more of a close link than other directors? He was shouted out at the joint address in a much more political way than we've seen since Nixon.
I think it's very concerning. I mean, as you mentioned, Comey and Mueller didn't want to have anything to do with direct dealings with the president. Comey went so far as to refuse to play basketball, even though I think he's something like 6'8" with the president, because of that. So I think, and having some of the things that Kash Patel has said in the past, it's hard to imagine that there couldn't be there won't be some mischief on phone calls between Kash Patel and the president. I mean, normally the FBI director reports to the deputy attorney general, and the attorney general is the one who communicates with the president. This is very different, and I think also very dangerous, but also consistent with all the other things we've been seeing.